Welcome to this explainer. Okay, yes, that is a highly authoritative title card made entirely out of elbow macaroni art, but don't let this completely absurd visual fool you, because today we are unpacking a historical event of literally monumental proportions, the 1867 purchase of Alaska. Was it a total masterstroke of geopolitical strategy, or just a colossal, incredibly lucky mistake? To really wrap our heads around this, we gotta look at the numbers.
2 cents. Seriously, that is the number you need to keep locked in your head for this entire explainer. 2 cents per acre was the rock-bottom clearance aisle price for what would eventually become the most pivotal real estate transaction in modern history. I mean, imagine buying land that completely transforms the global standing of a nation for less than the cost of a gumball today. How did a deal like this even happen? Well, let's take a look at the receipt. Check this out. Here is the actual piece of paper that bought Alaska. It's an 1868 Treasury warrant for $7.2 million. To put that into perspective, if we adjust for today's money, you're looking at roughly $140 to $150 million. For that price, the United States acquired a staggering 586,412 square miles of land from the Russian Empire. We are talking about an area larger than Texas, California, and Montana combined. Absolutely massive. But to understand the why behind this enormous transfer of land, we've got to travel across the globe.
Chapter 1: The Russian Exit.
So back in the 1850s, the Russian Empire under Tsar Alexander II was in a really precarious situation. Honestly, they were practically desperate to offload this massive North American territory. Russia was essentially backed into a severe corner by 3 immense pressures. First up, crippling debt. They had just suffered a bitter defeat in the Crimean War, which raged from 1853 to 1856, and they simply couldn't afford to maintain these super distant colonies anymore. Second, there was genuine fear. Tsar Alexander II was terrified that in a future conflict, Britain, who remember controlled neighboring Canada, would easily march in and seize Alaska. And third, the economic engine of Russian America was completely broken. The sea otter fur trade, which used to be incredibly lucrative, had entirely collapsed due to overhunting. The territory was literally bankrupting them.
If you look at this historical map, you can see just how dangerously close Alaska was to British territory over on the right. For Russia, selling to the United States was, well, it was their safest geopolitical chess move. It ensured they actually got paid for a territory they couldn't defend anyway, while simultaneously placing a massive friendly U.S. buffer right between themselves and British expansion. It was basically a defensive strategy disguised as a real estate sale. But, how was this actually received back in America?
Chapter 2: Seward's Folly. Enter Secretary of State William H. Seward. He was an ardent expansionist who saw Alaska as this amazing strategic gateway to Pacific trade routes and lucrative East Asian markets. But the American public? Yeah, they definitely did not share his vision. Critics mercilessly mocked the deal. They called it Seward's Folly, Seward's Icebox, and my personal favorite, Andrew Johnson's Polar Bear Garden. You kind of have to remember the context here. The United States had just emerged from the devastating American Civil War, so the public thought that spending millions of taxpayer dollars on what they perceived as a barren, frozen wasteland was just utter madness. Despite that brutal public backlash, Seward pushed forward with incredible speed. I mean, this was essentially a midnight deal. Seward negotiated practically overnight with Russian diplomat Eduard de Stockel. They formally signed the treaty on March 30, 1867. By April, the U.S. Senate ratified it, and the formal transfer of power took place at Sitka on October 18th of that very same year. The deed was done. The United States had acquired its polar bear garden. But hey, history loves a good plot twist, right?
Chapter 3: From Icebox to Treasure Trove.
As it turns out, history completely vindicated Seward. His critics literally couldn't have been more wrong. An explosive series of resource discoveries completely redefined Alaska's worth. After the 1867 purchase, the 1890s kicked off the legendary Klondike and Alaska gold rushes, which sparked mass settlement. And then, jumping ahead to 1968, we get a truly world-altering moment, the massive discovery of oil at Prudhoe Bay. Let's just break down the sheer scale of this economic boom, because it's wild. This supposed icebox ended up generating hundreds of millions of dollars in gold. But it wasn't just mining. Booming salmon canning fisheries and a massive timber industry became major industrial drivers. And that 1968 Prudhoe Bay discovery, it revealed North America's largest oil field. This single discovery made Alaska a critical energy pillar for the U.S., eventually leading to the massive engineering marvel that is the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. Ultimately, this 2-cent per acre purchase generated hundreds of billions of dollars in energy and minerals.
But the value of Alaska wasn't just financial, was it? It was deeply, deeply strategic. Alaska became the Cold War shield. During the 20th century, what looked like a reckless purchase of ice became a massive geopolitical defense mechanism. The U.S. was able to position critical radar networks, military bases, and missile systems directly across the Bering Strait from the USSR. It fundamentally changed global defense strategy for good.
Chapter 4. The Ignored Sovereignty.
Now, we have to soberly address a much darker reality of this transaction, because this vast territory that was casually traded on a piece of paper for $7.2 million, it was never empty. The territory was home to numerous native Alaskan tribes, including the Tlingit, Haida, Inupiat, and Yupik, among many others. These indigenous peoples had successfully inhabited, managed, and thrived on this land for thousands upon thousands of years prior to the 1867 treaty between Russia and the United States. The harsh truth is that the 1867 transaction entirely ignored all native land rights. Neither the Russian Empire nor the United States consulted the original inhabitants, let alone recognized their sovereignty. It wasn't until over a century later, with the 1971 Act, that the United States government finally addressed these long-term tribal land claims. To really understand the scale of that eventual reckoning, we can look at the specific numbers from the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act of 1971, often referred to as ANSA. This legal and financial settlement resulted in roughly 44 million acres of land being returned to regional native corporations, alongside $962 million in financial compensation. It was a complex, massively significant attempt to address an oversight that had been completely ignored for 104 years.
Chapter 5. The Macro Takeaway.
So, when we synthesize all of this information, from a desperate Russian empire fleeing debt to the staggering hundreds of billions in oil and gold, the Cold War military shielding, and of course the century-long delay in recognizing indigenous rights, the historical weight of this outcome is truly staggering. Was the purchase of Alaska at a mere 2 cents an acre the ultimate stroke of geopolitical genius by William H. Seward? Or was it just an incredibly lucky gamble, a defensive maneuver that stumbled into hundreds of billions of dollars, all built on a foundation of ignored sovereignty? Keep questioning the history behind the maps, and thanks for joining me on this explainer.